Hi, we're here at the Portland Media Center for the Civic IQ series, where we're meeting each of the candidates for mayor in the city of Portland. And I'm here today with City Councilor Andrew Zarro.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Right. So, Andrew, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background? What do we need to know about you?
Yeah. As you've said, I'm the city councilor right now. I'm the representative for District 4. I was elected in 2020. Very different time to decide to throw your hat into municipal government. And my partner and I live in Back Cove. We've been here for just about 10 years. Originally from Vermont, and I've always worked in a combination of public sector work that really, I was a Main Street director, so I worked for Boston Main Streets. I've done a lot of work in social entrepreneurship. And then I worked at the Grow Smart Maine, the state's smart growth organization when I came to Maine, and worked all over the state in communities, helping them address what mattered most to them while they were dealing with growth. I then decided to become a small business owner myself. So for the last 6 years, I owned a coffee shop. First one was in Woodford's Corner, and then moved downtown. And that was really when I lived my values of being very active in our community. Um, Coffee shops are a great place to connect with people. Um, I am one of those people who just for whatever reason I love municipal government. It's the closest you can get to constituents. It's how you can impact people's lives in a way that's meaningful. It's less cerebral, right? It's tangible. You can bump into us at the grocery store, and sometimes that's why I will go grocery shopping outside of Berlin. But I just turned 35. I am the youngest person on the city council, and I really care a lot about Portland. I mean, we live in one of the greatest cities, I think, in the country. And I'm a big believer of civic engagement. So anything that I can do to get people excited about government is really important to me. And how they can leave their fingerprints on policies that matter to them. I think I've noticed in my work in the community, but also on the council, that I'm seeing a lot of people starting to unplug and be apathetic. And I want to fix that because our democracy requires people to be engaged. So that's a big part of my call to action and why I care about this work. So I'm really excited at the prospects of being Portland's fourth elected mayor, because we need a new vision for the city. We need a new generation. And we need someone who's going to bring the council together and someone who's going to bring the community together to address the really significant challenges that we're facing as a city. I've done that before in the public sector, in the private sector, on the council, and I'm ready to do it in this role. So this is my invitation to the entire community to join in accomplishing that.
Great. I'd like to explore a lot of those points you've just raised. But first, could you kind of take me back to your earliest impressions of Portland and what was it? When did you first come here? What kind of city was it?
I was really little. I was like baby. So yeah, my family would always come to Portland, to Maine in the summer. I feel like people have three connections. If they're not born and raised and stayed in Maine, they have three connections to Maine. They went to school here, they went to summer camp here, or they married someone from here. And so my connection was we would come here every year. And Portland was a city that we would visit. We didn't stay in Portland, but it was the big city, right? It was the metropolis of Maine. So we would come here for, errands, but it was a city we never really stayed in when I was little. We would go through. And then fast forward, I started coming to Portland as a young adult. And this was in like the late 2000s. And I just thought it was the coolest city. You could do something here. You could have an impact. It was kind of gritty, but it cared. I mean, you can almost feel the pulse of downtown Portland. You can feel that people are interconnected. And that was really attractive to me. So when all of my friends were moving to New York and San Francisco and Austin and Portland, Oregon, my partner and I moved to Portland, Maine, and we were 25. And everyone thought I was nuts. Like, what are you doing? Why aren't you going to a city where you can focus on your career, you can do something? Well, to me, this city is where you could do something. You can have an impact. So Portland's a part of its appeal to me was that it wasn't this super polished, you know, place that, you know, you had to go to to check the box that you made it there. This is a community that I was attracted to because it was the intersection of, you know, small businesses and neighborhoods who really wanted to do the work themselves and show up and change their community the way they wanted. And it was a really inviting community. It's you can For me, I felt at home here because I could be myself here. So I know that it has changed so much in the decade that I've lived.
How so?
It's becoming less accessible. I couldn't move here now. My partner and I could not move to Portland, Maine right now. And that's, you know, hopefully we'll get deeper into housing affordability, but it's become a city that has become we're a year-round economy. We're the largest city in the state of Maine, and for some reason we are still treated as this destination to go for a couple, you know, for a vacation, or, you know, get a second or a third place here, and that's having really negative impacts on our local economy and our local housing market. So I know it's becoming unattainable. The people who made it that crunchy, cool community where everyone was all hands on at the same time, those people might live here, but they don't work here anymore because they can't afford to. So they're being pushed out to Westbrook, Biddeford, even more, you know, further out places that are more rural. And we're starting to see the impacts of it. I mean, I know the pandemic impacted everyone, but, you know, Monday, Tuesday nights used to be when you would go downtown to see live music as a local, and you would get to see people. Businesses aren't open anymore because workers can't live here, and the cost of doing business here is too much. So we're starting to see, and I know we are not the only city, lots of others in the country are dealing with this, but we're starting to see the very fabric of our community be pulled, and that tension is really showing up in Portlanders. People want something to be done. So while I still think the core values of our city are the same, we care deeply, we're compassionate, we're excited, we want to get involved. I think we're a city of helpers. When something needs to be done, we show up. But now it's our turn as the electeds to help the people of Portland live, work, and play here. So that's the most noticeable thing I've seen in the last.
So if you were to project forward 10 years, you know, presumably you got elected, that you've had 2 terms, which would be a first.
It would be a first.
What's the city going to be like in 2033?
So under my plan, one of the most ambitious goals that I have that is attainable is we need to build 10 to 12,000 units of affordable housing, and then in the next decade, right? And that's something that has not happened in the last 15 years. We've seen, since around the Great Recession in 2008, we've seen a significant reduction in that, and we're feeling the pinch now. So that's one of the most significant changes that I plan to see, 10 years from now. The comprehensive plan in 2017 argued that about 2,500 housing units in the next 10 years would do the trick. Well, that was incorrect. We're clearly seeing that live out in real time. So we need to be bold with our housing policies. And the way, I think, to get to those 10,000 to 12,000 units of affordable housing in the next 10 years. And I say affordable because right now it's so inflated. I'm also including missing middle market rate housing, is our land use, right? And we're seeing other cities tackle this. Minneapolis just did a full rezone of their city to make it streamlined. I believe there is not we should do everything in our power to make sure we can build housing in every part of the city. There's the obvious exceptions like our parks. We love our parks. I certainly wouldn't make that argument. But there are huge swaths of our city where you cannot build housing. And then we talk about we have a housing crisis. And then we talk about how our taxes are going up, right? So these are pretty common sense things that we can do today. And to your question, a decade from now, we're going to see really positive results that are going to start to fix decades and decades of bad housing policies. I think I've been really open about talking about rezoning right now. A great example is our industrial zones, right? We have light and moderate industrial, can't have housing there. A good example is where all the breweries are in East Bayside, right? So you have housing on one side of the street and then huge chunks of land. You cannot build housing. Big sections of Riverside and Warren Ave, right? Those are on major corridors where public transit can access. why are we choosing the status quo when we have developers who are ready to work with us, right? We have other issues with zoning and permitting that I hope we can get into, but that is the key to unlocking the potential of this city. And we have lots of folks who want to work in Portland. We have lots of folks who want to build in Portland, but we are pushing them to Westbrook, to Augusta, to other cities because we have a reputation that we need to fix. And it's that we're not easy to work with. And we also have prohibitive land use policy. So for me, that's day one. We're going to prioritize that. Lots of other things I would like to do, but that is what I plan on doing. If we don't do that, so if I don't get elected, if we do stick with the status quo, we are on a trajectory that is going to continue to enable people scooping up housing here that is not going to be for long-term use. We are going to continue, we are on the fast track to a San Francisco at a much smaller size, a city that is for elite and a greater metropolitan area where people who work in the city have to live. And so we're going to encourage automobile use, we're going to encourage sprawl, bad environmental impacts, climate impacts. I mean, that is the trajectory we're on. So that's why we need forward-thinking policies and we need a brand new perspective for the Portland of tomorrow. Because while I love the nostalgia of what Portland past, those days are behind us and it's time to get to work.
So, as you know, there's been a lot of controversy about the role of the mayor. We didn't have a mayor for almost 100 years, or directly elected mayor, and we just went through a charter review process that was ultimately unsuccessful to give the mayor more power. I think there's still a lot of confusion in the public about what the mayor does, what the mayor's role is, how the mayor influences events. And I wonder what your perspective on this is. Is what is the job of the mayor, and how does the mayor accomplish that?
So in our form of government, I believe it's really important to have whoever's in the role of mayor, their number one task is to make sure they are bringing people together to accomplish their policies, right? Their vision, their initiatives. And personality plays a huge role in that. So I think, one, you need vision. You need a roadmap of this is where I as mayor want us to be in 5 years and 10 years. And then you have to pull your council on board and you have to pull city staff on board. So I understand there are folks who say, we have a really weak mayor right now. They're one of nine. There's nothing they can do. And I push back on that because the mayor sets the agenda for the council with the city manager. But that means the mayor has the right and the authority to say that they are going to prioritize housing on every agenda. They're going to prioritize the climate on every agenda. They're going to prioritize affordability on every agenda, and working closely with the manager to accomplish that. I mean, at the end of the day, 5 councilors can direct the manager to do what they wish, right? Within the context of our charter and policies. I think we need someone who's going to bring people together, who is singular in that vision of accomplishing work, right? We cannot be comfortable with inertia because Portlanders are fed up with that. And I join them in that. So I think the mayor in its current form actually has a lot of potential to get these ambitious agenda items accomplished, but it involves rolling up their sleeves, working really closely with the city manager, whose purview is city staff, the community, and the council to get that done. So, and that happens to be what I do. So I'm comfortable in saying that I think I would actually be a pretty impactful mayor because I've done it as a district councilor already. I've gotten a lot done in 3 years, and I do. District 4 has my heart. All the districts are beautiful, but we, I have an agenda here. So, but I've been able to do that before with staff, with the manager, with the council, and the mayor. But this is why we need a mayor with a bold vision, who is not here to alienate people. Their job is to leave the place better than they found it. I don't know if I would have run if the strong mayor won, because it would have become it just would have been such a different structure that I think whoever would have become the next mayor would have had 4 years of chaos. It would have been so new. There would have been so many moving parts. And we're a city of 68,000 people. We might be the biggest city in the state. We are the biggest city in the state, but we're pretty small, which means we can get things done by working closely together.
You know, a lot of what you describe is behind the scenes work, working with counselors, working with the manager. But there's also a public role to the mayor's office that people have expectations that they will hear from the mayor, and they haven't always been met. And I wonder how you would approach that part of the job.
Yeah. So I try my very best to be the most accessible counselor. It's been a big reason. One of the reasons why I ran is because I didn't feel heard. It was impossible to hear from my council as a business owner, as a constituent. So that's always been really important to me because no one likes to be ignored. Even if you disagree with the person, you should respond to them. And I think the mayor does have that expectation of being accessible. I think the mayor's job is one of the hardest jobs in this country. Any mayor of any city or town, that is the hardest job. You wake up every day and you look around, you're like, what's on fire today? What are we dealing with today? And it's hard to be accessible at all times. I think that's when you have a really good relationship with your counselors, whose job as district counselors is to be boots on the ground. But the mayor's also meant to call people into City Hall. That's the people's house. One thing I would love to do is change our rules right now, because you're right, behind the scenes is where everything tends to happen. And that's where I think I've been most impactful, working behind the scenes. And then before you know it, the policy is getting voted on. But I would love to restructure the way we do our work. To resemble Augusta a little bit more, which we can do. And that's instead of, right now the policy is we have an agenda setting meeting as one of our first meetings of the year. We all have Post-its that we put on issues, and the most Post-its get the most issues. It's past 2 years, it's been homelessness, housing, and climate and sustainability. So, and then, the chairs of the committees go and they do their thing, and sometimes, they'll send stuff to the full council as they wish. What I would love to do, and this would be an amazing way, not only to get the mayor to work closely with the community and have them be heard, but it would be a really effective way to prevent citizen referenda from showing up every year, is have that agenda setting session in the beginning of the year be the opportunity for the community to work with a counselor on whatever the issue is. Say it's I've been talking about vacancy rates. So say someone's counselor Zarro, I'd love to work with you on vacancy rates. And then I say, I will sponsor that. And at the meeting of the first agenda setting meeting, I sponsor that. I give my reason why we should work on it. And I refer it to the Housing and Economic Development Committee. The council then would vote 5 votes, send it to the committee. It gets worked on in the committee. And then if the committee wants, they send it back to the council and the council votes it up or down. That would be extremely impactful because the mayor and the council are calling the constituency into City Hall and saying, what do you want? What matters to you? And then they're working it. There's lots of opportunities for public engagement. There's lots of opportunities for the council and staff to do their work. And if they want to support it and send it along, they do. And if they don't, then that's also the work. But it diffuses this tension between staff, council, and the community of, well, you're not hearing me. It's not accessible. So I truly believe City Hall is the people's house. I did that in my committee that I chair, Sustainability and Transportation, this year, and it worked. We got a lot of people who showed up. It was like 2 hours of public comment, and we did adopt some of those items that we worked on this session. So I would love to see that be our new process because people need to be heard by their electeds.
So, last question about the mayor. We've had 3 very different styles of administration. Anything that you look at from the past experience that you'd like to emulate? Is there anything that you want to avoid?
That's a good question.
That usually means somebody's not going to answer it when they tell me it's.
I usually answer my. So I think there's something that I think we've learned from each mayor that is commendable. Anyone who raises their hand for public office and does this work, I respect them. But the first mayor was really good at connecting with Augusta, really focused on that. The second mayor had big ideas and wasn't afraid to swing big. The third mayor was so good at bringing people to a place where they felt like they could talk to her. They felt like they could rely on her, um, being available. Um, so those are all commendable traits that I think that those are good for any public figure to have. From vision to the day to day. I want, but they also had very different times they were serving under. I mean, specifically, our current mayor was sworn in and then just had the unthinkable happen. Um, Now we're at a time where I think there is a sense of urgency that at least the first couple of mayors didn't have to deal with, right? And that's just been the last 4 years. I think have really done a number on every city and town in this country. But I want to be a mayor that is able to pull on the strengths of the previous, but also now it's time to really get to work. I want to push for policies that are going to better our constituents. And I'm going to do it in a way where I'm bringing a creative coalition along with me. And I think that is what I would like to bring as the fourth mayor, as my strength. Uh, Whoever sits in the mayor's seat next has massive challenges that they need to tackle head on. We cannot kick the can down the road anymore. We are possibly beyond a breaking point for a lot of our issues. So that's why we need someone who understands where we came from to know where we're going, and is not afraid to try. So, yeah, I mean, I know the previous mayors are all very big. They've left big imprints on our community in really different ways. And so I mean, I appreciate everything they've done. I've learned a lot from them. Um, but it's also, again, we're a relatively small city. So I know I'm going to bump into them all the time. And I look forward to calling on them for their insights, when the time comes.
All right, so you've listed off a number of the big challenges the city faces, but let's maybe start there. What do you, if you're ranking them, what are the biggest challenges for city government for our community?
Yeah. So the top two, and they are very close to each other, is our homelessness crisis and housing affordability. Those are very interconnected, though. One does impact the other. And I've been talking to a lot of Portlanders, going to a lot of doors. Those are the two issues people talk about the most. What we're going to do to support our unhoused neighbors, how that's impacting our community, and I can't afford to live here anymore. What are you going to do about my taxes? That, and so those are not mutually exclusive. I think close after those are asylum seekers, are I think this last summer we really saw people for the first time pay attention to our climate crisis in a way they had not. We're seeing the impacts in our island communities and our waterfront. So I think people are really starting to wonder how the municipal government can engage in climate work. So those are, I mean, there's lots of others, but if I were to give you the top four, those are what I believe are the issues that people will be voting on this November.
Okay, well, let's start with affordability. What can the city do to make housing more affordable?
Yeah, there's a lot we can do. The first one I already talked about is through recode and rezoning our city, right? If we want housing, we need to incentivize building housing. It's not rocket science, but it is hard to move or it has been hard to move the needle on doing that. So we're going through a recode right now. I don't believe that'll be something that this council will be voting on just based on the timing of it. But we need to the current, yeah, yeah, and that's been worked on for as long as I've been on the council, and I still couldn't tell you entirely kind of what that process looks like and what to expect from it. But I do know, and I know I had already said this, but that is step one in tackling our housing affordability issue. We need to do more to incentivize housing. We have, TIF programs, tax increment financing programs. Those are great for affordable housing. But I think we need to be looking at sections of our city where housing makes the most sense, right? So I talked about East Bayside. That's a dense, walkable neighborhood. It's on public transit. We should be building there. We should be building all along Forest Ave, right? Think about it's one of the most heavily trafficked roads in the city. There's not a lot of housing along Forest Ave, is there, right? So we should have benefit districts. We should create every opportunity for, Recode Phase 1, one of the big takeaways was ADUs, accessory dwelling units. The state loves ADUs. The city says they love ADUs, but we make it really hard to build an ADU, right, through setbacks of your property. So we need to absolutely reimagine our permitting and inspections at the city so that we can make it easier for people to build. And I'm not trying to be overly critical, but one of the most common pieces of feedback I get is that our city is really hard to work with. And I'm quoting someone, it's almost as if their job is to get to know. That is powerful feedback. And not trying to be overly critical, but we have to acknowledge where we are so that we can fix the problem. And so again, everyone wants to work in Portland. It's just we have a cultural issue to work on. And I think once we start to really take it seriously, we have lots of people who want to build in Portland. The city is not a developer, right? Once upon a time, we did have more of a role by having municipal-backed mortgages. Would love to consider bringing that back, giving people the opportunity to pursue home ownership if that's for them. But what we are seeing is, we're seeing referenda around certain issues because we're not doing enough, right? So we are seeing, rent control is talked about very regularly. And I think the reason why it's being talked about is it's a very tangible way to enact in the current housing market, right? But the way it's the most effective is if it would be coupled with significant housing stock. And that is where we're failing as a city. And I'll own that, right? I've only been on the council for 3 years, but I will own that. We are not doing enough to prioritize and incentivize more housing stock. So
I'm sure you've heard the concerns. People say, how can we be building luxury condominiums, hotel rooms when there's a lack of affordable housing? Can the city government play a role in the types of things that are developed?
yes and no. I think this is where you get creative. So ultimately, if you own a lot and you want to build a hotel on it, that's yours. You can do that, right? If you want city subsidy, that's where we get to be involved and say, okay, hold on. And we've done that before. Exactly. But for the most part, you own that property, you want to build luxury housing on it, that's on you. You'll go through the planning board, but for the most part, you're not coming to the council unless it's a specific issue. What we can do though is, and I've heard from a bunch of people, how about, for every unit, every hotel room that's built, we take a short-term rental off the market, right? I think we need to always come back to the fact that we're in a housing crisis. So everything should be discussed. Everything should be on the table for a conversation. Doesn't mean it's going to be the idea we move forward with, but I think that is my North Star. And I think that's everyone's North Star. Housing affordability, we don't have enough housing. I mean, the city's population right now, as I said, was 68,000. That's not even our highest. It was before the 1960s, in the mid 20th century, we were almost 80,000. And Franklin Arterial ripped an entire neighborhood apart, and other policies from urban renewal did a lot of damage to our city. So we're not even at the population peak that we've been at. That's important to remember because when people think of when Portland used to be and things weren't maybe as hard, there's lots of reasons why, but we did this to ourselves with previous generations implementing really harmful policies. So those are opportunities for us to revisit. And I brought that through my committee. It was in the council in workshop on Monday. That's a transformational project, restoring Franklin Street, right? Potentially 1,000 plus units of housing. So great example of thinking big and there's a lot of federal funding for it, right? Portlanders aren't gonna have to pay for that in their taxes. So I think it's just really important for us to say, this is a yes and situation for us to really tackle our housing. And again, I'll reiterate, it's gonna take time because it took a long time to get us here. We're talking 15, 20 years. So it's gonna take us 5, 10, 15 years to get out of this. But the longer we wait, the worse it's gonna get. So I think that the city needs to be the number one partner, back to your question about, what can the city do? The city needs to do everything in our toolbox to be the best partner we can be, to call people in, to say, how do you want it? What works and what doesn't? How can we get you to build with us? That maybe the city needs to revisit our staff, like our departments, right? maybe we need to re-engage more of a holistic approach to real estate. Maybe we need to pull people in from the creative economy in City Hall so that there is someone who's working directly with domain experience on these issues. But um,
Yeah.
what's happening now is falling short, and I hope every candidate recognizes that.
So, one of the ironies of Portland is the traditional worker housing neighborhoods that were walkable and accessed by public transit and close to employment opportunities have become wealthy neighborhoods because they're so desirable. People want to live in a place where they don't have to get in a car and drive everywhere. Um, and the demand for those housing units has priced out the kinds of populations that used to live there and then that would still like to have that kind of lifestyle. But when you talk about density in other parts of the city, I'm talking off the peninsula, you run into a lot of opposition from neighbors, and maybe some of the recalcitrance around city staff and the slow walking is in response to what the people have told them they want, which is they don't want more density. So looking forward, I appreciate you're talking about growth, but looking forward, how do you see how the city will grow, where the density will happen? Is it possible to meet the market for people who want to have an urban lifestyle in a city that has a tradition of um, almost suburban development?
Yeah. I mean, great question. And this is the work I did when I was with the Smart Growth organization working in communities all over Maine. How do we grow while preserving what we love about this place, right? And I'm an off peninsula counselor. I live in Back Cove, and we have predominantly single family homes. My street's a great example. Lots of single family homes on one section of the street, and then built right into it, lots of multis, 4 units, 5 units, 10 units, right? It makes sense for our community. But that when that community, got going, it was mostly just single family, 30s, 40s, and 50s capes, right? And with large lots, big, I think a lot of people walking around can't tell the difference of an R3 versus an R5, except maybe the lawn is a little bit smaller. But, you're right. People do choose to live in certain neighborhoods because they want that character of the neighborhood. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that I want to build, a tower in an off peninsula district. That would make no sense, not only politically, but in terms of the land use. That just doesn't make sense. I don't know anyone who's advocating for that. But what I do know is that we have lots of vacant parking lots in downtown Portland. Lots of them are municipally owned parking garages that are empty a lot. So, we talk about, oh, my taxes went up. Oh, we talk about affordability, and then we don't do anything in the places that are the lowest hanging fruit to actually, move the needle on it. So I think we have to start where it makes the most sense. I would be pretty surprised if there was pushback from the community saying, Forest Ave's already a highway. Why aren't we having dense housing all along it? I think most people can get on board with that. It's on public transit, right? We want to incentivize those corridors. Same for Warren and Riverside. I think that those are, we have some industrial businesses in a fairly vacant technology park. Like I don't think that those areas are going to really impact, developing those areas are not going to impact neighborhoods negatively for the most part. I think that we need to be intentional with our land use. People love their communities for very nuanced reasons. I mean, Munjoy Hill and the Western Prom have a lot of similarities, but also they have a lot of differences. And it's the nuance of those communities that people want to live there, right? And the same could be said of Deering Center or Backover or wherever. So I think we need to allow people to expand within their footprint a little bit, but keep it reasonable, right? That being said, I don't think if there's a 4 unit, 5 unit multi in Deering Center, I don't think that's out of character. I think that adds value. But I also understand change is hard. It can be scary. It's also inevitable. So if we're going to change, we need to control the path forward. We need to own what our roadmap is going to be. And this hodgepodge, no vision, is going to result in some bad policies. And that's again why I keep coming back to, we need a vision for our zoning. We need a vision in our with our mayor. We need someone who understands and is talking about where we're going and inviting people in to be a part of that when it comes to housing.
Isn't that what the Recode project is supposed to provide?
Supposed to. I've been on the council for 3 years. We've had 2 report outs, 2 workshops. Right now, the text is out there, but there's no map. That's one of the departments the council has no oversight into. I've asked every year for the mayor to appoint an ad hoc committee of Recode, every year. And every year I'm told no. And that's a problem for me. And that's a problem for Portlanders. People want to know what staff's working on. I don't think anything bad is going on, but I think there's a lot of time, money, and resources that's going into that work for what should be a transformational policy initiative. And the council does not have say. That's where the mayor's role is very impactful. The mayor appoints committees. The mayor has a say in that. And so that is where I would be different, because your counselor should be able to answer the question if you go up to them and say, hey, where are we at with Recode? You shouldn't have to be able to like get information a little over here and a little over there to put pieces together. For me, that's not good governance. And so that needs to change.
Wait, so where is the breakdown happening? Is it between staff and the electeds, or is it?
I think maybe a combination of both. I think, again, back to your earlier question, I think that's where the mayor plays a really intricate role of bringing the council and staff together with the manager as the most powerful position on city staff. So I think that's where the unified vision, the coalition building, gets at that, because we are bringing people together for addressing this together. I think there's an expectation after at least a decade of I'll just be honest. When I was elected, there was a policy. City staff do not talk to counselors. Do not talk to them. If you talk to those counselors, you're in trouble. That is not healthy. And we're slowly working through it. We're getting there. This isn't a secret, by the way. Like this is just, people know it. And I think people are finally walking through it and saying, well, that was dysfunctional. That didn't help. So we're getting there. Cultural, organizational change takes time, but I can't tell you how many times I've asked for us to have, obviously state law prohibits 3 counselors from convening, and I understand that, but I can't tell you how many times I've asked for us to have a closer relationship with senior leadership at City Hall, because that's how we get stuff done. One of the best parts of having a coffee shop was people would just come in and we would catch up. We would catch up with city staff and it was great. And I do have a really good relationship with most city staff, but I think structurally the institution as it currently exists is council's over here, staff's over here, mayor, manager, and then they sort of decide what we're working on together and what we're not. And don't get me wrong, it can be really challenging. I mean, electeds are notorious for having some big personalities and being tough to work with. I'll own my part, but so I think again that's the reason why we're talking about this massive policy recommendation that's coming out soon, and we can't really speak to it in depth, is a symptom of an internal structure that is not meant to be super transparent and accessible. And I will change that, especially on issues like this one, which are again once in a generation.
I'd like to shift to a related issue, which is the encampments, the tents. I have never seen such visible signs of homelessness. It appears to be getting worse. We've put a lot of effort as a city, into dealing with homelessness, and whatever it is we've done is not working. And I wonder if I could just get you to explain what we can do going forward, starting right now, to deal with this very sensitive, complex issue, and obviously great need.
This is going to be one of the biggest issues Portlanders are thinking about when they cast their vote in November. And this is not just a Portland issue. We are seeing this in cities and towns everywhere. Portland does have a huge heart, and I meant what I said before. We are a city of helpers, and I feel like right now in the last summer, I agree with you 100%. I've never seen it like this before in Portland. There's a couple of variables as to why, and I won't go too deeply into it, but a combination of we are the service center. Portland committed 40 years ago to have a municipal shelter. You see Lewiston City Council voted 5-2 a couple months ago not to open a shelter, even though they had state funding. Cape Elizabeth last year chose not to build hundreds of units of affordable housing, right? So you have our neighbors who are saying, no, this is Portland's problem. And then also have something to say about Portland when we have encampments popping up. But Portland punches above its weight. We always have. We're at 3 times our capacity. City staff works endlessly to achieve this. Our homeless services shelter was at capacity day one when it opened in March. Over 60% of the people at the shelter are asylum seekers who have very different needs from our unhoused neighbors. So what we're seeing right now is 2 underserved populations with very different needs at odds with each other. And the community's trying to make sense of it. We are making some moves now to mitigate that. We're opening a new shelter for asylum seekers on Riverside for 180 beds to open capacity at the shelter so that people aren't on the streets, right? Because right now we just don't have beds. But, and this is where my plans come in. We know data shows us that emergency housing on its own it's just not going to do it. Transitional housing coupled with housing first policies is how we are going to meet the moment. And so this has been done in other cities, right? Denver, San Antonio, and we've even been talking about it with GPCOG, the Greater Portland Council of Governments. So I'm proposing that we prioritize 100 units of micro efficient tiny homes with wraparound services as the solution to the emergency shelter barrier, right? Because people can't go to the emergency shelter for lots of reasons. If you're with your partner, you'd have to be broken up. That's probably not going to be okay for a lot of people. You might be using still. You might have a dog. You might not have a place to store your belongings, right? There's lots of reasons that an emergency shelter is not your answer. So transitional housing with wraparound services is the solution for a lot of this. There is state funding for it. I believe there's about $13 million that's been allocated from Augusta for housing first policies and something like another $70 million for communities who are addressing their affordable housing crisis. So there's 3 lanes of this. There's emergency housing, transitional housing, and permanent. Right now we're coming at it with just one. We've talked about what we need to do in the next 10 years for the permanent for everyone, but in terms of right now, the inflammation, we are seeing encampments because people are not getting access. And so that's the key. That's how we're gonna do it. And it's, they're quoted to be about $44,000 per unit. We're gonna do 100 of them. It's just shy of $5 million. We have $9 million in the housing trust fund at the municipal level, but then again, we have that 13 million and that 70 million at the state. And the state wants to see the municipality take the lead, right? And Portland already is. That's kind of what we do. We take the lead. But what I also want to do is call in the region. This is not Portland only, right? I've been walking around a lot of the encampments, talking to people, trying to help out where I can, listening to them. A lot of people are here from Lewiston. They don't want to be in Portland. They want to be at home, right? There's someone I was talking to the other day who's 40 years old and hurt themselves 2 years ago and got addicted to pills, and their life was stable, and it just like that. And now they are in an encampment, and they don't want to be there. Right? They want to be at home. They want to be in their community, but their community's not actively tackling this. Right? Portland can't make another city or town do anything, but we can be a good partner, and we can reach out and say, how are we going to work together to help both of our constituents? Because what's happening right now is not working. So this really is a regional approach. We need to work closer with Augusta and take them at their word when they say they want to help. Portland cannot point fingers. That is not how we are going to call people in to help us. We can't say you're not doing enough. We need to say, okay, you're going to help with money. You're going to help with great. We'll take it. We'll work with you on that, and we'll take it from there. And we'll partner with organizations that are here in this work with us. But again, there are solutions to these issues. Doing nothing is why we are seeing this significant increase in encampments. And we are doing a lot within the context of what our current policies dictate. I certainly want to be clear about that. We are doing a lot. We're doing more than anyone else as a city, but it's not meeting the moment because it's too focused on one part of the housing equation.
You know, you talk about the three parts, and certainly intertwined with this problem is untreated mental illness and substance use. And I know you don't want to point fingers at Augusta, but those are really state responsibilities, and clearly it's not working to the extent of what's going on. It's not making the problem less. And I wonder if there are things that can be done on the municipal level regarding the treatment. A number of cities have, in Canada, there are safe injection sites in several cities, and there are other kinds of local level projects that are done to deal with the fallout from inaction at higher levels. And I'm wondering if you can see Portland playing a more active role.
Well, I'm certainly not letting Augusta off the hook with being a part with because you're totally right. There are three crises happening at the same time: housing, substance abuse, and mental health. And that's why my proposal involves wraparound services, right? If someone is being, whether they're moved from emergency housing to transitional,
Provided by who?
I mean, that would be the combination of the state and the city and service providers, right? This is also where this is a public-public and a public-private partnership, because again, Portland's not doing it on their own, and there are organizations who we work with pretty closely now at the ECRT and at the state level. So, no, 100% Augusta has to be a part of our solution here through providing services for substance abuse and mental health. I know enough about safe injection sites to have a working knowledge of it. I believe last year the Council's Health and Human Services and Public Safety Committee had a presentation, or they were entertaining a presentation. I don't believe that they were able to have that conversation, but right now what we're seeing is very active public substance abuse happening in parks and streets. Like, it's just everywhere, right? We are in a precarious situation because of the Attorney General's protocol of what we can and cannot do in terms of response from the Portland police. So I actually met with the new police chief a couple weeks ago. He obviously was only a couple weeks in. Welcome to Portland. What are you going to do about all this? And so I'm actively working with the manager, the police chief, I believe we can expect a report out in the near future on an analysis. I've also been discussing with the district attorney that interpretation, because we are in a very gray area. But for me, I'll just speak personally of what I think. If I'm seeing someone actively using in public, if I'm seeing someone have, struggling with mental health publicly, if I'm seeing someone elevated, escalated, endangering themselves or others in the community, that's not okay. That is just not okay. And similarly, I'll just be honest, being okay with people living in tents is not okay with me, because that means we have not only have we failed at prioritizing housing first, but we're okay with saying, maybe we aren't going to fix this, so let's just settle with what we've got. And I'm just speaking as a person who lives in Portland and my personal beliefs of what I think we should be doing. So
The tents are here now. Building new housing first projects is a multi-year project, correct?
I mean, yes, with the exception of the proposal from GPCOG is a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Land use is the biggest barrier there. It all comes back to land use. So that potentially could be something that happens within a year, like very quick. You're right, though. Again, this is over a decade of it being ignored at the state and federal level. This is allowing major corporations to get people hooked on addictive medicine, not medicine, addictive drugs that are ruining their lives. And this is a failure of our society from actually caring for people. And so for me, it's really important that we approach all of this with care in mind. And I think being okay with people just existing in a tent with no support or services other than getting very basic needs met. We're bringing them food, we're bringing them water, we're trying to figure out how to get infrastructure for restrooms and showers. That's a failure for me, right? I want someone to have a home. I want someone to be able to get a place where they can get mail sent to them, where they can get a job, where they can take advantage of our awesome education system with adult ed. I want to give people a shot. And just because they're in this part of their life where, for whatever reason, the floor fell out from under them, I'm just not okay with it. And this, I will say, this is near and dear to my heart. I care a lot about making sure people are housed and cared for and get access to the services that they need. I know it's extremely difficult, but I think that, again, I have to keep coming back to the fact that there's a lot we can do, but it's going to involve all of us coming together and implementing some big ideas. And that's why I think this pilot is the only option we have. I mean, we can just break up encampments left and right. You know what that's going to do? It's going to move people elsewhere. They're just going to go elsewhere, and they're within the city, and it's going to cause trauma in the meantime. You see an increase of calls to the police department who already have capacity issues. You see other neighbors in other parts of the city say, "Wait, what the heck's going on? Not in my neighborhood." It's just perpetuating a cycle where nothing is changing. So we have to change the issue. We have to get to the root of the issue, not all of the symptoms. And tents are a symptom.
Hmm. Let's move to another related issue, which you already brought up. It's the asylum seekers whose needs are very different. Um, what is the city's responsibility here, and what are the opportunities? What are you concerned about when it comes to housing
Yeah.
these families?
This one is concerning for a couple of reasons because and this is a misconception from the public, which I don't blame anyone. It's not like we get an email every morning that says, "Hello, Portland, Maine. You are receiving X number of people in your community today." Yeah. XO, federal government. It's not, we have no idea, right? People show up and then we have to respond accordingly. So about a year and a half ago, I don't know, a year and 3 months, we did change our GA policy, our administration of our GA policy, because we, by state law, have to adhere to it. Of course, we're going to. But we ran out of housing. So now our policy is, here's your voucher, which, that's not great, right? That's also why you're seeing such a significant number of asylum seekers at the shelter, because it's first come, first serve, right? Very low barrier. So part of exacerbating the issue. What I want to do is look at this as an opportunity. We have people who are coming here. Maine is the oldest state. It is the whitest state, and we have a declining population. So let's look at this as an opportunity. We have people who are coming here and they want to be a part of the community and they want to work. Huge issue, though, is the federal government is not moving at all on work regulation, right? People can't work for at least 6 months, but it's usually more like 12 to 18 months. So you have people who are coming here who want to work, who want to be a part of the community and the economy, and they cannot. And I will give credit where credit's due to Congresswoman Pingree and Senator King, because they are doing a really good job of advocating for this. But what does that mean for the municipality? How does the city of Portland tackle this when this is clearly a federal issue? Very much above our pay grade. And Augusta, I feel like, feels the same way. It's not a state issue, it's a federal issue. But at the end of the day, we are where people are coming. So we're trying our best to sort of mitigate the issues that I was describing between our underserved populations, right? But small city. So I've heard all sorts of interesting thoughts on what we can do by issuing municipal only work permits and, taking a chance and see if that's gonna, incentivize the federal government to make, movement on this. I think that's risky, but I do appreciate people thinking outside the box. For us, it's per capita, we're dealing with this pretty significantly because of our size, right? But I want to recognize, and I'll continue to say that we have to look at this as an opportunity. Because if we start to go down the path of, why are they coming here? Or, what about Portlanders? That gets dicey real fast. And I know that we are better than that. We have to be, right? So I think right now we're doing our absolute best to make sure people have housing and access to, through GA and resources. But this is where we're working closely with our state delegation in Portland and the governor's office, to make sure that we are in constant communication with each other and making sure that Portland is not the only destination for people who are coming to Maine. Because there are lots of other cities and towns who I will say are starting to work better with us, right? We're looking at the hotel in Freeport, right? It's tricky because then you all of a sudden have, you have language barriers, you have more, access to resources that are challenging. But this is another example of
No one wants to live in a hotel. You can't cook. You can't. They can't walk anywhere.
exactly, exactly. Those are all like the expo, that was short term. Hotels, this is short term. But because we aren't looking at this from a big picture, then that's why we're not getting at it. And again, not to always come back to this with your last two issues, transitional housing meets the needs for both of these populations in different ways. And it is affordable and it is paid for. And I'm all ears. If someone has an idea that is great, we should go with it. Let's go with it. But right now, all signs are pointing to this is the next step. The state's excited about it. I think the region can really engage with it, and it feeds two birds with one seed, right? It's taking both of our communities who have different needs and allowing them access to better quality of life. And just to keep on that systems thinking, permanent housing is the goal for everyone. Permanent housing is the goal for asylum seekers. It's the goal for our unhoused neighbors. Our goal is to not always live in, if we're always looking at the emergency shelter, the emergency, then it feels like we're constantly in an emergency. And I think it's because we are right now, but this is when vision is everything. It's time we have, because we can't just say no. We can't say we're not going to do anything about it, or you can't come here. That's not on the table. And that's hard for some people to hear, but it's the reality, and we have to be very honest about that. So this is why, big solutions are the only way through this.
Glad that you mentioned growth, because a lot of residents of Portland, longtime residents of Portland, have the impression that the city has been growing at an alarming rate, and it hasn't. It's the population has been just about level the last two censuses, and the region has grown. People are coming here every day from across the economic spectrum, from asylum seekers to people, remote workers with very high incomes, empty nesters, all competing for the same urban housing stock. And I wonder if I could get you again to be specific about what your growth strategy is, and how big do you think Portland could get without losing the character that's attracting all these people?
So I'm a big proponent of smart growth. I do not believe in growth for the sake of growth. That's not, because that's when you're going to end up with completely unattainable housing costs. You're going to end up with lots of vacant commercial office space. So I think we need to be intentional about our growth, and I'm glad we're talking about that we are not at our highest population. The perception that Portland is getting big, I think, is because we make every list in that's out there, right? We have the best food, we have the best waterfront, but we also have folks who are scooping up second, third properties, right? So it's like, well, the numbers should tell us that we have enough, but we don't, because we're not being equitable in the distribution or the access of our housing units. On top of the fact that we do have a deficit of housing stock. I hope I've been clear on that. Yeah. So I think a lot about my neighbors in Back Cove, right? A lot of people who have lived there, they raised their kids there, they've lived there since the 60s and 70s, right? And now they want to stay there, but they're getting priced out. I do a lot of work with the Aging in Place initiative. I try to be helpful with making sure people, can get their sidewalks shoveled or get to the grocery store, and just sponsored with one of my colleagues funding another full-time position for the Office of Elder Affairs. But we have a lot of people who live in this city and have for a while, and they're feeling the pinch. And the assumption is, well, we're growing so quickly that's why I'm getting pushed out. And that's just not true. There's other variables that are contributing to that.
Opposite, right? We're not growing, and that's why you're getting pushed out.
Exactly. But then you have the conversation that we were talking about a moment ago. Well, what is that? If you want to build more, what does that mean for me? And I think we need to just be very clear that it doesn't mean, it's not bad. It's good. This is a net win for everyone. Your property taxes will go down. The mill rate will go down. You'll have a more vibrant community. You'll have neighbors. Like, I think the reluctance for change and fear are such powerful motivators for people. We've seen it in all sorts of elections, from candidates to referenda to ballot items. Like, people are afraid, and I think that's why it's our job as candidates or as electeds to meet with people and say, this is what we're looking at doing. What do you think? Explain everything. It's our job to make sure people are fully aware of the reality and then what we think we should do about it. And also, I mean, I hope I've shown in my time on the council that I'm always up to learn something new. And if that changes my mind or my vote, so be it. But I take it very seriously that it's my job to work with people and let them know this is why things are the way they are. And this is what I think we should do to fix it. And this is why I think you should support it because it benefits you. So, I mean, growth is, listen, if we don't do something, we are going to, like I already mentioned this, we are not on a great path right now. The trajectory is looking pretty grim. So, everyone, it's time to call the entire city to the table to tackle this. I think once people learn more, and I've experienced this doing a lot of doors, talking to people about this, once you have a conversation with people, hear where they're coming from, talk to them about why this is important, 9 times out of 10, people feel good about it.
You mentioned referendums a couple of times. Why do we have so many referendums, and is that a good thing? And if not, what should we be doing about it?
We've seen a spike in referendums for the past few years. The argument at first, my understanding, was that the city was not listening, and I agreed with that. I agreed. I think the city previous councils were not known for listening to the constituents of Portland or the entirety of the constituency. Fast forward, there were several issues that I was working on in committee in 2021. What year is it? 2022. And, those very items, from minimum wage to cruise ships, both showed up on a referendum while I was actively working on them in committee. So this is when I was like, there's a disconnect. This is being worked on. So what's going on? And I think, my proposal that I shared with you earlier about how I think we should restructure the way our rules work, I think would go a really long way because it calls people in. It says, no, you have to work with us. As our constituents are our greatest asset. Anytime I need to get something done in my district, the first group of people I reach out to are my constituents, because without them, I got nothing. I need them to be on the same team as me. So I think referenda, we're in a really unique situation where our referenda process, it's very easy to get an item on citizen referenda on the ballot in the city of Portland. Unusually easy. I think it might be the easiest in the country. And what we're seeing now are groups who are in opposition to each other play a game of tennis. So we have June, we have November, and that is getting untenable. I think we shouldn't expect. I'm a fan of referenda. They are a very useful tool. Marriage equality passed in the state of Maine via referenda, right? It should exist and it should be used when appropriate. I believe we cannot use referenda to pass policies every election. It is like trying to hang a picture on your wall, but instead of using a hammer, you're using a bulldozer. Why would you do that? I recognize that there are parts of our community that still don't feel heard. I totally see that. I own it. It's why I'm proposing changes to our rules so that hopefully they can feel more heard. But I think right now we are starting to see burnout. The community is absolutely done with referenda, which my concern is, God forbid we need one. People are just going to say no to it because they're just done with the concept of it at the municipal level. I think a lot of it comes down to trust. And that is, I'll tie it back into why we're here today. I think that's a big part of the mayor's role. Reestablishing trust with the community.
I want you to give me a quick answer on a really complicated question. Short-term rentals. Are they a problem? Is it a big problem? Is the regulation sufficient? Is the enforcement sufficient? What should we be doing about short-term rentals, given that, as you say, we're in a housing crisis?
Yes, you gave me my setup here. We are in a housing crisis, which means we need to revisit everything until we're outside of an out housing crisis, until it's in the rear view mirror. I do think, and this is just from data, that we are our enforcement of our existing ordinance around short-term rentals is not working the way it should. This summer, there are hundreds of units that have been operating illegally, right? So that's a problem because not only does that tell me we're not enforcing them, it tells me that people are okay with skirting the law. And if you don't enforce something after you've given them the opportunity to be educated, because I know some people might not know what the law is, then we have a problem. So I do think it's time. This council, as long as I've been on it, has not in committee had a conversation around short-term rentals. Pretty confusing if you ask me why. It feels like it's a good time to have the conversation because it's not a one and done. This is an ongoing conversation. I think we have to be really clear about what we're talking about. The island communities, very different short-term rental conversation than when we're talking about downtown or off peninsula, right? And that's where the nuance of community comes in. But I think it is time to have to revisit the conversation. I think that we need to do everything we can to incentivize long-term rentals while acknowledging there are Portlanders who pay their taxes by renting out, a room in their house or apartment, or maybe they live in a 3-unit. They own a 3-unit and they rent out the second or third for short term. But I think most Portlanders, even though I know the short-term rental referenda are the ones that failed, I think most Portlanders are acknowledging that what we have right now it's ill-fitted. It's not doing what it needs to be. And even if that conversation is as simple as, okay, how are we going to be better about enforcement? That's great. I mean, we have these rules, these ordinances for an example, or for a reason rather. But I do think that in the big picture, holistic conversation around housing right now, short-term rentals play a pretty big role. And in the last 10 years, we've seen them do this. And right now, globally, we are seeing that short-term rentals are having some unintended consequences on local housing markets. So again, my North Star, we are in a housing crisis. We got to take it seriously. And if that means revisiting what we currently have to understand what's a better option for us right now, then I'm all in on that. Because again, what's happening right now is not meeting the moment.
Completely unrelated. We have 3 high schools. There's been talk about consolidating them. Do you favor that? Do you have an idea which high school should be the winner?
I'm not going to pick a winner. It's actually really interesting. In such a short period of time, I've watched the conversation go from being very reluctant, for the community being very reluctant to having that conversation, to it being actively discussed from school board members to parents. I think people are recognizing that it is time, and it's time to do that. By pulling the community into that conversation. Obviously, it's outside of the purview of the council. That is school board first. But I'm surprised by the number of people who are openly talking about how in favor they are of it. Because it's just not, the model doesn't work anymore. It's outgrown what it once was. So I don't know. I think those are both pretty unique campuses, Portland and Deering specifically. Whatever we do, it needs to be something that we're proud of. We build a new campus, it needs to be, we need to make sure we say, wow, that's our school. We're proud of that thing. And I feel the same way about everything from infrastructure to sidewalks, streetlights. But I think that the community, it feels like what I'm hearing from a lot of people who typically disagree on almost everything, that has become something that a lot of folks are ready to talk about. So I'm actually excited about that conversation because it feels like one that it needed to be had. So yeah.
Quick one. It's a ranked choice election. You're going to put yourself first. Who do you put second?
Oh, I do like to answer every question that is asked of me, but I think I might pass on this one. Mostly because I haven't actually given it that much thought.
Well, you're going to have lots of opportunities to think
Yeah.
about it because you have a number of forums.
I will say that was a good question.
Uh, I guess the ultimate question for everybody is, why do you want to be mayor, and why should we vote for you? And I think that would be the way to end up
Yeah, it's a great
this
way.
conversation.
I love the way you phrased it. Most people say, "Congratulations, are you okay?"
Yeah.
Like, is everything all right? It's a great question. Why run for mayor? Why not run for the District 4 seat again? Or why not, be done? Like I started at the beginning of this conversation, I care so much about municipal government and I care so much about Portland. The city is so important to me and to everyone in my world. Even when people get really frustrated with Portland and they're angry with us and they're angry at just the state of things, they care. Sometimes they're caring very loudly at me, but they care deeply. And that is so special. How many communities have you traveled to where you can just feel you could be anywhere? It doesn't matter. Like it could just be, there is no sense of community. And this place is just rich with community. It's rich with people who want to leave the place better than they found it. For me, and this is one of the reasons why I ran in 2020 for my seat. You have two options when you are feeling like something needs to be done or you're overwhelmed or you are, borderline apathetic. You give up, you walk away, or you do something about it. And I'm a candidate for mayor who has concrete plans to solve our biggest issues. I am almost to the point, overly detailed with what I think we need to do. And people want that. People are craving that now more than I've ever seen before in our government, or even, I've lived in a few places. I've never seen the urgency that we're seeing right now. And I'm in it to solve the problems. I want people to rank me as their first vote or their second if they are looking for someone who's going to try to meet the moment. My campaign is not a laundry list. It's not a wish list. It's a promise to Portlanders that we're going to meet the moment and we're going to do it together. So I'm not doing this for my profile, believe me. I never thought I would have this much public attention. I'm not doing this for any reason other than I love this place. I love the people who live here, and I want more people to be able to call this place home if they want to. And so I believe it's time for a generational change. I think it's time for us to look forward towards new policies that are common sense and they allow people to thrive. I don't think that's a crazy idea. I think that's what most Portlanders want, even if they fall on different parts of the political spectrum. People want to be able to be proud of where they live, and they want to be able to say, that's my city. And so that's why I'm running. I'm running to do that because we can do better, and I know we can. And I, with as much admiration and respect of anyone who's running for this seat or the others, I'm the candidate who's going to do that. So that's why I would like people to vote for me. And I'm always here to talk to people about what matters to them. Truly, even if we don't agree, I'm here for them.
I think we'll make that the last word. And thank you very much for coming in, and thank you for putting yourself out and running for office.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.